what stopped policymakers from taking the kind of action that needs to be taken? Governor Kasich, speak on that.
Well, you know, it's interesting. In December, I made a phone call to George Shultz. He used to be the former Secretary of State. He's 99 years old, going on about 50. And I said to him, because he is the one that came up with the whole idea of carbon trading. And I said, how did you get involved with this? You know, it's really interesting because Republicans were at the foundation of this concern about the environment. I mean, this is hard to, you know, honestly. And he said, well, Ronald Reagan called me in the Oval Office, and he says, President Reagan says, well, I see we might be losing the ozone, George. And he said, you know, I don't know whether it's true or not, but we certainly need an insurance policy in case it's happening. And, you know, it was very interesting to think about it from the standpoint of we have to do things. And I've called a few of my friends to find out, Republican friends, what's happened. He said, well, we want to do it slower, they want to do it faster. Look, folks, what's happening in our country today is the conversations are just not happening. I mean, I was involved in so many negotiations in Washington with Democrats in the White House, and we at least had conversations. Now, I'm a believer that almost all policy change comes from the bottom up, whether it's the civil rights movement. Politicians didn't want to pay any attention to it. Whether it was women's suffrage. Ma'am, you don't think that those guys wanted to give you power, do you? It took how long to get women's suffrage? And African Americans, Erika, it had to fight another 50 years to get the kind of suffrage. There were so many African American women who were heroes, the things that they've done. Arnold, Arnold and I have been friends for a very long time. Arnold is a very unique political leader because he leads from the top down. I like to think that's what I did as governor, and it rankled some people. But when you see a problem, you try to go and fix it. But that's very unusual in politics because most things happen from the bottom up. When John Kerry called me and talked to me about this, he said, look, John, we're not going to get into all the prescriptions right now. What we're going to get into is a conversation that what is happening on this planet is a problem and that we need to all come together, have a dialogue. But folks, the idea that we might have, what would you say, 10 million conversations, this is how it's going to change. It is going to change when you will not tolerate anymore politicians that want to put their heads in the sand. You see, they're afraid. You know, they will become afraid to go to a town hall meeting where they don't have an answer for this. Now, how did we get here in a nutshell? You know, so people are going to ask you, well, what is the problem? My friends, some of my great friends, you know, have an argument with me. Well, you know, things change. Over centuries, the temperature goes up, it goes down and all. But let me tell you in a simple way what is happening. This carbon that gets generated from fossil fuel and so many other things does not escape the atmosphere. It creates a blanket. And methane, which is even much more dangerous than carbon and much more exponential in terms of creating this blanket, escapes into the atmosphere and buffers the carbon that's already there. It's one of the reasons why when we did fracking in Ohio, in my administration, we went after carbon. We had tougher rules on carbon, Arnold and John, than the federal government did, because we said this methane the methane is very, very serious. And when you drill, you have to make sure you can capture it. Well, as this carbon builds up and cannot escape our atmosphere, and as the methane coats that carbon, we have a blanket. And we wonder, so the sun shines through and brings us energy. And we just see these storms in Nashville, these horrible tornadoes that went through there. Why are they all so violent now? Well, they're violent because the heat that is generated by the sun into where we live can't get out. There's nowhere to go. So it's fueling fires. It's fueling the ferocity of these storms. And we see what's happening to the additional melting that is happening with our glaciers. You know, my wife and I have always marveled over the last 15 years, you go to Glacier Park, there aren't any glaciers there anymore, or the ones that are there are tiny. So what we have to do is to figure out, number one, how to stop building that blanket and allow the energy that is generated here to escape. And to put ourselves in a position where we can begin to capture the carbon that is up there and the methane that's up there, and to have a much more productive environment here. So when you heat everything and the heat can't get out, it causes all kinds of troubles. That, in a nutshell, is what is going on. And do we have to have a revolution? No, but I don't think we can just sit around and wait. You know, we can't just wait. It's like, oh, okay, we got a $23 trillion debt. Well, we can wait. Okay, we can't wait on that. We can't wait on this. But you have to be heard. And are there reasonable things that we can do? Of course. You know, of course there are things we can do to develop these renewable energies. You know, I've got a Tesla parked right out here. I got it yesterday, so I could say that. No, I've had it for a while. But, you know, there are things that we can do. We can shift more to solar. We can get more wind. We can begin to take carbon out of the coal that gets burned. I mean, there's so many things that we can do that are not revolutionary, but things that people can do in a reasonable way, and the development of battery technology and the storage of solar and wind. And so these are the kinds of things that we're talking about. We're not talking about some crazy thing out here, but we know that we have to speed it up. And America has to lead. I mean, can you imagine that America is not at the table? I mean, in my lifetime, I've never seen an America that wasn't at the table for good. And I'll tell you this, I love that Greta Thunberg. You know, a young girl, think about this for a second. A young girl shows up outside the parliament holding a sign and goes on strike. She's 15 years old. She's gotten older now. I think she's 16 now. And she inspired a young people's revolution all across the planet because she said, I can make a difference. You know what the question is for all of you? Are you and you and you, are you willing to make a difference and make it uncomfortable for people who are not putting this planet first, because our whole life is about providing a better future for our children, for our grandchildren, and for our great-grandchildren. And that's why we're here. I've got to tell you, it's so great to work with John Kerry, and it's so great to work with Arnold. And we're not going to stop this. We're going to do this across our country, and we're going to win. But we're going to win because we have you. That's why we're going to win. So, thank you, Erika, for giving me an opportunity to speak.
Thank you.